Hey, what's going on, guys? Alright, so let's go ahead and continue with this thing. Now, before we move on and actually cut our leather, I've said this before and I'm going to say it again. When you make your template, put notes on it. Like you can see here, I've wrote on this side down for right-handed. I've also put right here on the belt loop that I want to extend it from this point out 4 inches. So now I know when I go to lay this on my leather, I need to lay it down just like this and extend it out to that 4 inches. I have done it on multiple occasions where I got lazy. I didn't write anything on it, stuck it down, cut my leather. I intended for it to be right-handed, and lo and behold, I cut it out left-handed. So always double check on that. Now all I'm doing right now is I'm just kind of cutting this big section off here because it just makes it a little bit easier for you to handle when you're cutting out your cut. Alright, let's go ahead and get this thing ready for water forming. On the template, if you remember, I had you put that center line, and you're going to actually transfer that over to the back side of your leather. You'll also notice that I did not extend it all the way to the top, and that's simply because I am going to make a gouge in this leather, and I don't want that leather, or that gouge to be visible, up here on the top. So let's go ahead and make that gouge right quick. Alright, let's go ahead and put a little bit of decoration in this thing. That serves no purpose at all, but just gives it a little bit of flair. Now you can round this off if you so choose, but I don't know. It's all personal preference, and I just kind of like this look just a little bit better than round. And of course we'll go back in with the beveler. Now remember, we're going to put about a 1/2 inch welt in this thing, so we do not want to bevel the underside here. Otherwise, when we put our welt in and glue everything together and stitch everything into place, you're going to have that ugly little gap in there. So I always like getting a feel for where that 1/2 inch mark is and just starting a little bit beyond that. Now after we punch those holes out, you're going to want to flip it over to the back side, and we are going to take a freehand stitch groover. I'm going to groove it out just a little bit. That way when we stitch it, that stitching falls in there and doesn't get, basically just doesn't rub. when we pull our laplander in and out. Okay, now before we move on to wetting this thing down, these curves, when this sheath gets closed up, it can be kind of a pain in the butt at times to burnish those real well or slick them. So I am actually going to go ahead and slick that section now, and once I close it up and everything else, then I'll go back and slick it again. But this will definitely help you achieve a nicer look on them edges. You know, it's trust me on that. When we close that up, it's going to be kind of hard to get into there with that folded over. So go ahead and slick it now, and then go back and touch it up after we get it all sewn together and all that. Now, do me a favor, don't tell my daughter that I'm using her Chuck E. Cheese cup. She'll hurt me. Okay, so as you can see, we've went ahead and wet it, and I've folded it over. Everything lines up really well. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to insert the laplander into it. Now, if I was concerned about, you know, rusting or anything like that, I would go ahead and I'd wrap this. But I'm not really concerned about that because this is not going to be in this for very long, and I'm going to take it out. If I was going to leave it in there for an extended period of time, then obviously I would take appropriate measures to ensure that rusting would not occur. So basically, all I'm going to do is just kind of work it. With my fingers. I'm not trying to water form it per se. I'm just trying to give it a basic shape. I don't know if you can pick up that contour right there, but it's a good thing that we went ahead and did 5/8 instead of a 1/2 inch, because if we would have went a 1/2 inch, this sheath would not fit. Go ahead and bring our belt loop over. Okay, so as you can see, we've got a nice basic form now. Our laplander is going to sit inside there. Now remember, this curve right here, that's completely up to you. If you want it to round around your laplander, then by all means go ahead and wrap that around. I like this look better, so that's kind of why I do it. Okay, I'm going to remove my laplander now, and I'm going to actually stick that sheath in my oven at about 120 degrees, and I'm just going to let it sit there for about 30 minutes. I'm going to take it back out. I'm going to put the laplander back in it, kind of work it with my hands again, and then I'm going to put it back in the oven, put it at the lowest setting possible, which is about 100 degrees on my oven, and I'm just going to let it sit there until it dries. Alright, so the next thing I've done is I've actually cut out the welt, and as how I cut out my welt is, let's imagine that this piece of paper is a scrap of leather. I'm actually going to lay my sheath on that scrap of leather, and I am actually going to mark the outside of it. Just like so. And I'm going to, since I want it to be a 1/2 inch welt, I'm just going to mark it 1/2 inch all the way. Then after I mark it all the way, I will connect the dots just like I did on the template. Then I will cut it out, and you'll be left with your welt. Now after I cut my welt out, I actually will lay it, on the inside of my sheath, and I will take a pin and I'll mark around the inside just like that. And it's what that's going to allow me to do is when I go to glue this welt in, I now know how far up to bring my glue. So even after I dye it, you should be able to see that pin mark. So the next thing we're going to do is we are actually going to dye. And a lot of you guys have seen this glass little cutting board that I use, and I kind of like it just because of the simple fact that you're always going to drip dye and all that good stuff, and the fact that it's glass, it just wipes right off. Alright, I've got wide varieties of dye, but my most popular is the dark brown, and the gentleman that this is going to, I've made several sheaths for him, and they're all dark brown. So I'm going to go ahead and make this one dark brown just so everything kind of matches. The welt doesn't got to be anything pretty. I mean, it's obviously going to be on the inside. It's going to be glued in, so it's never even going to be seen. Just give it a quick little once over. Now on the sheaths themselves, I always have a habit of doing the edges first. You don't have to do that. That's just kind of the way I do it. Don't exactly know why. Just one of those things. A lot of people don't even bother dyeing the inside of their sheath, and that's actually just one of my big pet peeves, especially if it's going to be a sheath that you're going to sell or as a gift or something like that. Just seems nicer to be able to open up the sheath and look inside and see that it's dyed and not just a tan color. I mean, if it's your personal sheath and you don't mind, then that's one thing, but like I said, if you're selling it, then take pride in your work. Now, like I've said in past videos, when you go and you put this very first coat on your smooth side of your leather, it's going to look horrible. Don't panic. It will look better after you apply about the third or fourth coat. And then when we go back and buff it out and apply a leather finish and conditioner and everything, it'll all come together and look nice. Alright, so I'm just going to apply this last coat. I'm going to set this thing aside and let it dry. Now, like I've said in the past, don't just lay this on the countertop or on the glass and let it dry. The moisture will dry unevenly and you'll be left with dark spots. So hang this up in the air and let it dry. I take a wire coat hanger and hang it on that. Cheap and easy.